that Kel's spies brought him the piece of information that would shape everything that followed. Your uncle isn't only buying alliances. One of his company, a wiry former smuggler named Ressa, told him one night over a low fire. He's buying slaves. Dozens of them. Says he's building a new labor force for mines Threnmore granted him. But my contact in the market says he's paying triple price and asking specifically for young, strong, quiet workers. No questions asked about where they've come from. Kel had learned enough of war to know that when a man in power starts buying silence in bulk, he is usually hiding either a weakness or a fear. Either way, it was an opening. Then we become slaves, Kel said. Ressa stared at him. You're the last living heir to a kingdom, and your plan is to sell yourself into bondage. No one looks twice at a slave, Kel said. They look everywhere else first. The plan was as simple as it was dangerous. A trader named Uthgar Vesey ran one of the largest caravans supplying Barrick's mining operation, and Uthgar was known, among certain circles, to occasionally acquire free men through less than legal means when his quotas ran short. Kel's company arranged, through a chain of bribes and half-truths, for Kel to be captured and sold into Uthgar's caravan along with two of his most trusted companions abroad. Silent warrior named Doss and a quick-fingered young woman named Ellen who could pick a lock faster than most men could find the keyhole. They shackled him for real. The iron was real, the hunger on the march was real, the whip marks another slave took across his back for stumbling were real, and more than once in that caravan Kel had to grip the bars of his own restraint and remind himself, in the old voice of Orvin Threll, that pain endured with purpose is not the same as pain endured for nothing. You don't talk like the others, she said, studying him in the dark. You don't beg. You don't pray. You watch everything like you're waiting for a door to open. Maybe I am, Kel said. Then I hope it opens somewhere good, Mira said, and for the first time since he was a child too young to remember it, Kel felt something that was not calculation. The caravan reached the mining fortress 2 weeks later, a grim stone complex built into the hills outside Threnmore's capital, and it was there, beneath the very walls where his uncle now slept, that Kel began the second phase of his return. At night, when the guards grew lax and confident in the darkness, men began to disappear. Not slaves, guards. A sentry posted at the eastern gate would simply not be there at the changing of the watch, found the next morning with no wound visible except a single, precise strike to the base of the skull, as though death itself had walked past him without breaking stride. 2 nights later, 3 more vanished from the inner courtyard, their bodies discovered hidden in a grain store, positioned so carefully that it seemed less like murder and more like a message. By the end of the first week, the fortress was gripped by a fear that spread faster than any army could have managed. Soldiers who had faced real battles began refusing night postings. A superstitious rumor took hold among the ranks that the spirit of the old murdered King Aldemar had crossed the sea to hunt down every man who served his brother's throne. Barrick, informed of the deaths and the whispers both, dismissed the ghost story publicly and privately doubled his personal guard, though even doubled numbers did nothing to slow what was coming, because Kel did not need an army to bring a kingdom to its knees. He only needed fear, patience, and the element that no one in that fortress had reason to suspect, that the ghosts they feared walked among their own slaves every day, shackled, silent, and utterly unremarkable. It was during this time that Kel finally arranged to see his mother. Isolde had grown into her power the way certain women grow into cold rather than warmth, regal, composed, entirely convincing as a queen who had suffered a terrible boar-hunting accident and a kidnapped, presumed drowned son, and had rebuilt herself from that grief into something formidable. Kel watched her from a distance for days before he found a way, using Ellen's talent with locks and a guard bribed with counterfeit favor, to be alone with her in a private garden Barrick had built for her within the fortress walls, disguised as a laborer sent to repair a broken fountain. He had rehearsed 100 versions of this moment in his head over 25 years, and every single one of them had assumed the same thing, that his mother, whatever her failures, had been a victim too. A woman coerced or deceived or terrified into silence by a man more powerful than she was. He had built an entire private mythology around her innocence because a boy who has no mother needs, more than almost anything else, to believe she would have loved him if only she could have. "You've been repairing that fountain for 3 days," Isolde said without turning, her voice bored, aristocratic, utterly unaware. "It doesn't take 3 days to fix a fountain." "It doesn't," Kel agreed, and something in his voice made her turn fully around for the first time. She studied his face the way a woman studies a stranger who reminds her uncomfortably of someone she used to know, and then her eyes dropped, almost involuntarily, to the collar of his rough laborer's shirt, where the neckline had shifted just enough to reveal the pale crescent birthmark on his collarbone. The color left her face entirely. "It isn't possible," she whispered. "The sea kept me," Kel said. "Even when you didn't want it to." For a long moment neither of them spoke. Then Isolde did something Kel had never once imagined in any of his 100 rehearsed versions of this reunion. She did not weep. She did not fall to her knees. She straightened her spine, the way a woman straightens herself before delivering news she has decided, after long practice, not to be ashamed of. "You should have stayed dead," she said. "It would have been kinder to both of us." "Kinder how?" Kel's voice cracked, despite every year of training that had taught him to keep it steady. "Because now I have to say aloud what I promised myself I would never say to anyone." Isolde's chin lifted. "I never loved your father. I married a boy chosen for me by 2 dying houses, and I spent 13 years performing a devotion I did not feel, because that is what queens do. I loved Beric before you were ever born, and I loved him after, and I have never once regretted what we did to make room for that love, not the crown, not your father, and yes, not you either. You were never a child to me by the end. You were the last obstacle standing between me and the only thing I ever wanted." Kel felt something enormous and silent collapse inside his chest, the way a building collapses, not all at once, but floor by floor, each one giving way beneath the weight of the one above it. "I forgave you before I even met you," he said quietly. "I built a version of you in my head for 25 years so that I could survive believing my mother was stolen from me instead of a woman who threw me into the sea with her own hands." "Then you built a lie," Isolde said, and for just a moment, the smallest fracture in her composure, something like grief, moved behind her eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. "I am not sorry for loving Beric. I am sorry you survived to hear me say so." Kel left the garden before she could see what her words had done to him, and it was Mira, waiting near the servants' quarters with a bowl of stolen broth she'd saved for him, who found him sitting alone in the dark afterward, his hands shaking in a way she had never seen from him. "What happened?" she asked. "I found out the truth is worse than the lie," Kel said, and for the first time, he let her see him without armor, not the ghost the fortress feared, not the prince he had been born, just a man whose grief had finally caught up to 25 years of outrunning it. Mira did not press him for details. She simply sat beside him in the dark, her shoulder against his, and stayed there until the shaking stopped. "Whatever she is," Mira said eventually, "you don't age."